Hello and welcome back to Content Collective. I'm Josh and this is the show aiming to make sure you're getting the content that you're craving, getting the insights you desire, and can help you get the information you need to live your best life. In this episode we're back with 4 more shows. Podcast number 1, we have an interview with the glucose goddess, explaining the impact of glucose on the body and the manageable actions we can take to control our blood sugar levels. On podcast 2, we've got an ex-FBI agent who focuses on the psychological tricks that they use to get the information that they desire. Podcast number 3, we've got a doctor who specializes in gaming and social media addiction and how you can overcome the struggle with boredom. And the last show is actually a documentary based on the best-selling book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which is basically a modern take on finding your purpose. So let's get into it. Podcast 1. Now this one was suggested by one of the guys in the comments from the last video, so thank you Adam for doing that. And again, if you know any great podcasts or great information that you think should be shared for everyone, please comment down below. So this first podcast is from The Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. Now Stephen's podcast interviews some of the most successful people in the world with topics ranging from business, health, relationships, lots of things. On this show, he has a lady whose name I'm going to butcher. She's called Jessie, Inchauspé, also known as the glucose goddess. She is a French biochemist and best-selling author who, when at the age of 19 broke her back, became interested in how to optimize human health, specifically glucose.
Sugar do 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 do. Honey honey do 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 do.
So one of the things they talk about is what causes glucose spikes and what are some of the symptoms that you see and how these spikes cause more craving. Basically, it's not our fault that we get cravings. This is just how, with the evolution of food, how things have got. Back in the day, the only sweets that our ancestors would be able to get is fruit. And the fruit back then isn't like the fruit of today. Fruit would be few and far between and then realistically not that sweet. It'd be quite fibrous, lots of seeds in them as well. But being the clever humans we are, we've mutated those over time and through generations and generations made them sweeter and sweeter, cut out all the fiber, cut out the seeds, and you can get fruit everywhere all year round. We then extracted the sweet stuff from fruit, made it into sugar, refined sugar, and then put it in everything. We put it in drinks, we put it in food, we put it everywhere. Because why not? It tastes so good. Our bodies need it. But even though our bodies need it, they haven't adapted to the food landscape that's out there today. And because of the amount of sugar we're having, our energy levels are fluctuating through the day. We get brain fog, and that's because our neurons aren't firing as they should be just because of the glucose spikes. And there's also links between glucose spikes and long-term illnesses like dementia and Alzheimer's. Scary stuff. There's also links between glucose and skin diseases like eczema, acne, and general inflammation. Also, when you can limit your glucose spikes, you tend to sleep better too. So being able to understand and study glucose is key. There's also trends between the number of glucose spikes that you have and then how fast you age. People tend to age quicker the more spikes that they have. But most of us know nothing about glucose and managing our glucose levels through the day. People that have diabetes, they'll monitor their glucose, but that's about it. So what is glucose? Well, glucose is our body's favorite source of energy. All of our cells use glucose for energy. Our heart cells, our brain cells, our muscle cells. It's very important. And we get glucose from 2 categories of food: starches and sweets. Now starches are anything from potatoes, pasta, rice, and sweets are like bananas, cookies, or Coca-Cola. Now we think we need to eat more of this stuff because this is the stuff that gives us the energy. Because some glucose is good. However, too much glucose causes all the issues that I mentioned earlier. It's like if you've got a plant. You know, watering it is what it needs to stay alive. But if you put too much water on that, the plant dies. Aww. So what's going on at a cellular level when we've got too much glucose? Well, first, our glucose levels in the blood spike. Our blood sugar levels are really high, so there's glucose everywhere. Now, our power cells within the cells are called mitochondria. And these cells produce energy for all of our cells in the body. And it takes glucose for them to make energy. But when there's too much glucose around, they just shut down. They become overwhelmed. There's too much fuel. They don't know what to do with it. They just stop.
It's just for me, I can't do it.
You can! You can do it, you can!
And this is why we get tired. This is why we crash. The second effect is called glycation. And this is to do with our aging. The more spikes we have, the faster we age. It's more visible on the outside, but it's also happening on the inside too. The third problem with glucose is related to insulin. Now, insulin is amazing. It comes from the pancreas and it grabs all of that extra glucose and then stores it away. It stores it in the muscles, it stores it in the liver, and it also stores it as fat. Now, whilst insulin is really helpful, having too much insulin can lead to type 2 diabetes. And that's because our body just becomes less reactive to that insulin. So how can we flatten the curve? Well, the glucose goddess has about 10 things that you can do, actionable things to actually flatten that curve. And I'll go through a couple of them. Number 1 is eating food in the right order. Now, according to studies, this can reduce the glucose spike by up to 70%.
Wow.
And the correct order to eat food in, apparently, is veggies, then your proteins and fats, and then your sugars and your carbs. Which, to be fair, isn't always the most practical, but the overlying theme here is speed of delivery in the body. Now, the reason for this is all to do with how quickly glucose is deployed in your body. If you're eating sugars, starches on an empty stomach, they go straight into your body, straight into your blood, and your blood glucose levels spike. Now, veggies contain fiber. When your fiber gets into your stomach, if you eat your veggies first, what it does is it creates a protective shield. Basically, it's like a bit of a mesh that creates within your stomach, which acts as a protective layer, so when the sugars are coming in, it slows down that release of glucose into the body, flattening that curve up to 70%.
Wow.
Another one of her tips is taking a tablespoon of vinegar. Apparently 1 tablespoon of vinegar in a glass of water before you take your food can reduce the glucose spike by up to 30% and the insulin spike by up to 20%. I personally have been trying to do the eat veggies first approach and have felt less of a crash afterwards, but that could be placebo because the lady told me I wasn't going to feel as bad. But this was a really good conversation. They go through a few more topics, a few more things from that list of 10. They chat for a good hour and a half, and I thought it was really interesting to learn the effects of glucose on the body and how we can manage that to improve our health. So if you want to hear more, links below. The second podcast today is from a guy called Tom Billy. Now, this is the first podcast from this guy that I've ever watched, but all of his content is around trying to make sure you can execute your dreams, how to level up your mindset, develop leadership skills in business, and basically learn how to fulfill your potential. On this episode, his guest is Andrew Bustamante, who is an ex-CIA spy. FBI, open up! Who says humans are predictable. And he uses this predictability to coach businesses and people to have an ultimate advantage in life. They start off by discussing the 3 lives that all of us live. Your public life, your private life, and your secret life. Now, your public life is the life that you live most of the time. It's the life that you live at work. It's what a lot of your friends will see. It's the public persona that you put out to the world. The next layer is your private life, and this is where some really close friends and family members get to, and this is maybe a little bit more yourself, not that public persona, but what you're like a little bit more behind closed doors. But finally, you've got your secret life. Now, potentially no one knows what you're like in your secret life. Maybe a close partner will know, but maybe no one will know. And this is what you're like behind closed doors completely, when all the lights are off. But we will have these 3 lives to live. Now, all of these ideas are things that he was taught at the CIA. So these are the things that they teach to all of the operatives. Similarly to that, there's also 3 phases in your life where your worldviews are formed. Our first worldview is built when we're sort of around 0 to 7 years old, still figuring out the world, not really knowing much, taking everything that we're told as truth. Then from 7 to 13, we start to question the world, question our parents, question school, question what's going on a little bit more, push back, and start to develop a bit of a different worldview. Then between 13 and 25 is our final phase. Here we're really cementing our worldview and how things work, really questioning ideals, questioning what we believe in. And they say by the time you've reached 25, most of our worldviews have been established. We have a view of the world and that's how we see it. And by doing research on a target, they're able to work out pretty much what that person is going to be like based on where they grew up, where they went to school, where they went to university, locations, cultures, that sort of thing. They're able to take a very educated guess as to what a person's worldview will be. To start to move from that public layer to the private and then ultimately into the secret. When they meet these targets, they're also trying to match personality with that person. So through doing like the Myers-Briggs personality test, they're able to have a rough estimate of what their personality could be. So they mirror that personality themselves to try and build a rapport with that person. People that have a similar personality tend to get on pretty well. And then they build this rapport, slowly build through it, so there's that trust there, so then they can get all the secrets that they need from them. An easier way to really find out what a person's personas are like, their public life versus private life versus secret life, is to make sure that they're tired. They mentioned that there are 3 things that people have limited supply of. People have limited supply of money, energy, and time. Now, if you meet someone in the morning, they've got their massive day ahead of them, they've probably had a nice big coffee, they're very much in their public life, putting out that persona that they want the world to see. Hello, this is me. But if you're with them for the day and then it gets to the evening, or it gets really late, and they get really tired and frustrated, you're more likely to see that public persona dissolve a bit. We all know someone when they're tired that they're just not the same. Shut up! Shut up! And that's when their more private persona tends to come out. And they say they use a combination of all of these techniques to basically get from the public to the private to the secret layer to then ultimately try and learn the secrets that they need from this target. Interesting shit. Another thing they discuss is that there are apparently 4 temperaments that make up a successful team. These are a lion, a fox, a leopard, and a bear. People that are lions tend to have a temperament to organize things. People that are foxes tend to have a temperament to create ideas. Those that are cheetahs tend to have a temperament to act. And bears tend to have a temperament to just build relationships. Now apparently you need all 4 of these animals, all 4 of these temperaments to build a really successful team. You can have a good team with maybe 3 of these, but to have a really high performing team, you need all 4 personas. So if you're looking at hiring someone and you want to make sure that you're getting the right persona fit for your team, you need to find out what their persona is. However, when interviewing people, you're very much dealing with their public life. And this is the life they want you to see, not their true temperaments. So we're saying what you can do in an interview is try and ask them a disarming parallel question that will get you the answer that you need. For example, you ask them, how would you plan your perfect holiday? Now, if they list all the places they want to go, they talk about what time of year to go, what they're going to do when they get there, different prices of the resorts, you know you're dealing with a lion. If they say they've thought about it quite a bit, I'd love to go to Antarctica to do this, or I'd love to go to Africa and do that, or I've heard Australia does this really cool thing, you're more than likely dealing with a fox, an ideas person. If they say, I'm getting on the next flight to South America, and you ask them, why, what are you going to do? You're like, I'll work it out when I get there. You've got a cheetah. And finally, if they're saying, I have to check what my boyfriend's doing, I want to see what my friends want to do. This is someone that likes to build relationships. This is your bear. So you have to disarm them with a parallel question to really get that honest answer. And then you can get your high performing team. The last topic that I want to touch on is the discussion around childhood trauma and high performance. Studies show that children that have been through some level of trauma tend to achieve more in life. But it's all about finding the right balance of trauma. You need enough trauma where the person feels like they need to prove something. But you don't want too much trauma where they've had to resort to external coping mechanisms. Drugs, porn, substance abuse. They also talk about the formula for success, which is basically just love the process. And really you've got to think about, what would I love to do even if I'm failing? But this one was a really good one. It gives some insights into how espionage is actioned, what they're trained to do, and how they can manipulate people to ultimately get the answers that they're looking for. They cover other topics like how people self-destruct, how the New World Order will change in the next 10 years, and how different foreign powers influence different elections. Links below. Podcast number 3.
Another one.
Podcast number 3 is from Chris Williamson and his podcast Modern Wisdom. And basically this show is all about trying to help you understand the world and make things easier for you. And he has on Dr. Alok Kanogia.
Easy for you to say.
Also known as Dr. H. Healthy Gamer. Dr. K is a psychiatrist, a Harvard Medical School professor, a Twitch streamer and YouTuber. And they discuss how gaming and social media affect the brain. So firstly, they touch on how technology is everywhere and how it's designed to just trigger our brain. Our minds are constantly triggered, all day, every day. And this is very different to how we evolved. Our historical setting was not very engaging. You'd be walking around, there'd be some birds in the trees, but it'd be nowhere near as stimulating as the world is today. And now we're constantly triggered. Even if we go for a walk, you've probably got a podcast on, you've probably listened to music, or on the phone. Our minds are constantly triggered. And companies know how to trigger the mind, and they work so hard to make sure they're making you as triggered as possible. When discussing the impact of video games on the brain, they explain that gaming's so fun because it scratches a psychological itch. There's scenarios in a game that you can complete so much easier than in real life. In a game, you can come from being down, coming back, getting a victory, being top of the leaderboard, an absolutely massive triumph. Your heart is racing, your adrenaline's pumping, you're absolutely buzzing. And this can be achieved in the game quite easily, if you're any good. But to recreate that in real life is actually really difficult. Those scenarios rarely present themselves. So we've got this feedback loop in the virtual world that we struggle to create in the real world. And then all of this overstimulation takes away from the real world enjoyment. Going from clutching up a battle royale win for the boys, last man standing, 4 teams left, bringing home the big dub. You go from that to reading a book, and it just doesn't hit the same.
Boring!
He also says how social media is very similar to this as well, but social media preys on our emotions more so. So how can we set boundaries between gaming and social media? Well, gaming and social media make us lose awareness. So the more we can cultivate awareness, the more we can be mindful, the better we'll be. You also need to be aware of why you reach for social media. Is it at the same time of day? Is it after certain things happen? Is there an emotional feeling you have before reaching for it? And any distraction you get can end up sucking you into these attention-grabbing machines. So one thing you can do is cultivate your awareness and be more aware of what your triggers are. Another thing is about changing the environment. When you go to bed, can you leave your phone in another room? When you go to the toilet, can you leave your phone in another room? Most of us can't last 5 minutes on the toilet without taking our phone with us. And phones are getting so developed now with the biometrics, the Face ID, that it's just so much easier to get in. There's a lot less friction. You don't even have to put the number in to get on social media. You literally look at your phone, swipe up, and you're in. So understand the triggers, understand the emotional states you're in, and see if there's any environmental cues you can use. Because ultimately, we've just become intolerant to boredom. So some easy exercises you can do is leaving no phones in the bathrooms, not listening to any music or audiobooks on a walk, and the third thing is not to watch something whilst you're eating food. And also meditation can help with our urges and impulses. Meditation strengthens our frontal lobes, and our frontal lobes help control the impulses. That's the part of you that goes, no, maybe not. And the final thing from this podcast is all about finding your purpose. We love finding your purpose on this show. And they discuss why finding your purpose is so hard. Because finding your purpose actually comes from within. In life, when people give you responsibilities and people give you things, they're more of a should. You should do this, you should do that. When you've got a purpose, it allows us to make sacrifices. But we're in a world now where nobody wants to make any sacrifices. You won't even leave your phone while you go to the toilet. And purpose actually makes doing the hard things easy. Everyone wants to make things easier. But if we can easily do the hard thing, then life becomes easy. Because of how society externalizes our attention, with notifications, our phones, we no longer know what's within us. We just live in this external world. The more our attention is pulled outside, the more we lose sense of what we actually want. So we need to find our purpose from within. But how can we do that? What he says is you need to reach the end of thought. So where do our thoughts come from? Our thoughts come from our sense organs or our memories of our sense organs. And thoughts usually come from the outside. I want to play this game. I want to watch this movie. And these are all things from the outside. We've seen things. We've seen the game. We've played the game. Oh, I want to do that thing. 10,000 years ago, people didn't want to play the game. 100 years ago, people didn't want to play the game. It's only because we've seen it, we want to play it. So if you go for a walk without a podcast, without any music, your mind will start going through loads of thoughts. And eventually it will run out of thoughts. And your mind will be bored. And it'll be searching for more dopamine. It'll make you want to reach for your phone, scroll, listen to something. But if you push past that and sit in that boredom, wait until all the thoughts have come and gone, sit in that, and then ask yourself, what do I want? And if all the thoughts are gone, you will start to get things to float to the surface of what you actually want deep down. But this is a process that you're going to have to repeat. And that will help you find your purpose. What do you want to want? Not what do you want, because what you want is informed from the external world, branding, marketing, other people's expectations. What do you want to want? And that should break through that layer. And there's another great podcast. They touch on a lot more topics like how porn impacts brain development, how screens impact our sleep, and how to cope with brain fog. Link below. Now this last one is actually a little bit different. This last one is actually a Netflix documentary based on the best-selling book by Mark Manson called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Forewarning, in this next section, I will use the word fuck quite a lot.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
So apologies to my sensitive viewers. The documentary is basically about the current societal pursuit of happiness and really how people should find meaning from what they find important. Basically, you're all gonna die one day. You only have so many fucks to give, so don't waste your fucks on the little things that really have no impact on your life. The doc was really cool, lots of random clips of humans doing random things, but not so random because it does support the narrative that is taking you through on the journey. And considering the focus on your own mortality, I did find it quite light-hearted and a pretty cool approach to like the self-help type of thing. One of the things they touch on is how we are responsible for everything in our lives. Life is always gonna suck a little bit, and everyone has their shit, but it's up to us as individuals not to blame them. And awful things happen in life, cancer, getting hit by a car.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. But most people fall into the trap of just blaming other people. A lot of people had something really bad that happened to them. They blame others and they just can't get past it. And we aren't always at fault for our pain, but we are responsible for it and how we move forward. After every awful thing that happens in our life, we've got a choice to make. And that choice is like how we react to this, how we move forward, how we make it meaningful. Now this is a tough thing to do, but it's the best thing to do. And if something has happened because you've made a mistake, take responsibility of that. Take responsibility for how you're behaving so it doesn't happen again. You'll end up making the same choices, the same mistakes again and again until you take the responsibility and change. Another problem is that we're always overloaded with positivity. But life, as I said, is always going to suck a little bit. And we live in this materialistic world where if you want something, there's a formula for that. There's a formula for how you can get there. If I want X, you need to do A, B, and C. But for happiness, there's no real formula. However, our mind tells us if we just get this new car, if we just buy this house, then we'll be happy. And we believe this. Every time we believe this. But it just isn't true. It's like the carrot dangling in front of you that you'll never reach. Every time you do reach there, you're happy for a little bit, but then there's more dissatisfaction. And then we keep thinking the next thing will make me happy. The next thing will solve all of our problems. And this is the concept of the hedonic treadmill. We're spending all this time, all this energy, and we're actually getting nowhere. So the idea that there's some magic solution, magic formula for us to be happy is bullshit. So you actually need to sit in some negativity sometimes to build up a tolerance to that. Everything you do in life will have challenges, it will have setbacks, and accidents will happen. If you can sit in those feelings, you can be more prepared for when things go wrong next time. Happiness doesn't come from getting rid of your problems. Happiness comes from solving problems. And if you're hiding from your problems and you're escaping those problems, it's really just going to hurt in the long run. So what you need to do is choose your struggles. Choose your problems. Choose what you're going to sacrifice for. And then these are the things that become the most meaningful for you. Because if you've got something that you truly want to sacrifice for, and then some other suffering comes along the way, you don't care. And at that point, you become unstoppable. And in life, we're more or less forced to have problems. So we may as well choose problems that we actually want. So not giving a fuck isn't really about not caring about anything. It's actually about choosing what to give a fuck about. Because when you give a fuck about some things, you don't give a fuck about other things. The sacrifices that you make for your family, that it's hard to work out, that it's hard to get up in the morning. You don't care about those things because you care about your family. You care about staying in shape. You care about your job. You need to pick things that you care about. You just can't care about everything. And so basically we're overloaded with things to give a fuck about. Like we touched on earlier, overloaded with social media, overloaded with screens. Loads of things to give a fuck about. The new iPhone, the ozone layer, global warming, 5G. Give a fuck about your pension. Give a fuck about glucose. So many things to give a fuck about. But what you need to do is reserve those fucks for the things that really matter. When we start life, we give a fuck about everything. Does my hair look good? Did that person I just met like me? Have I got matching socks on? And eventually you start to realize that these things really have no impact on my life. So we start to become more selective of what we actually give a fuck about. We let the things that really don't matter slide, and they call that maturity. So we saved our fucks for the things that are truly fuck worthy. Our family, our best friends, my bench press PB. And this is enough. The simplification of our fucks actually makes us happier. And this show was really well shot. It's intertwined with Mark's stories from his personal life. He also drops other stories to support his narrative, like the story of the Japanese Lieutenant Onoda, who stayed in the forest years after the war was over, defending it for his country. And a few more in there too. It's an hour-and-a-half watch, it's on Netflix. Give it a watch, it saves you reading the book. So that's it for this episode. Thank you everyone for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully there's some insights there, some things for you to take away. Hopefully there's some bits for you to add value in your life. Thanks again and we'll see you on the next one. Peace. Hey, thank you for spending the time to watch the video. If you could just like and subscribe to my channel, that would be amazing. And if you have any other content that you want to share with the world, please comment below and we'll try and get it in the next one.